It's been over a decade since Arnie's last starring role, and The Last Stand brings him back into the fold of action superhero, and it's an interesting film to say the least. It's all about a sheriff called Ray Owens, played by Arnold Schwarzenegger, who has to stop a fleeing Mexican cartel leader who has escaped FBI custody and is heading towards Mexico. And his only way to get into Mexico is through the small town of Somerton, which is the town that Arnie is sheriff of. The film essentially is about him trying to investigate some strange occurrences that are happening thanks to a group of mercenaries who are in Somerton preparing for the cartel leader's arrival. And it's all about how he has to orchestrate a defense of the border, this town, um, using a ragtag group of people who really don't know what they're doing. So it's quite a funny little film in many ways. It's definitely got a lot of comedy in it, and I think that's one of the film's saving graces because the action in it is just so remarkably, yeah, it's so generic. I mean, there is a moment where a guy gets exploded by a flare gun, but among all the other sections, it's really quite uh, standard. So nothing really has changed in the Arnie world. I mean, I would have loved for it to be over the top violent, like Total Recall, like that scene on the elevator in the film where they start shooting at Arnie and all the civilians are getting hit and blood's flying everywhere and everything's going off the wall. And I think that would have worked for The Last Stand. Even with the comedy, it would have been a really quite brutal, dark action film. And I think that would have worked, but they go in a different direction. I think it was to be more commercial and more accessible, but I think it really doesn't fit the tone of the film. And the film's got some interesting performers, and I think Peter Stormare is always fun in whatever he's in, despite the fact he's trying to give off a really bad American accent. Um, but he's really fun, and Arnie is on top of his game. He's just having fun, and I think that's what this film's about. It's just about having fun. But I think the main problem with the fact is you can't have that much fun because it's quite a slow film, and there isn't much pace to it until the last half an hour when everything kicks off. But it doesn't really kick off to the extent you're expecting it to. You think things are going to get really wild, and you get about 15 minutes of action, and then you get a weird car chase through a hay field that just looks weird. I mean, it really isn't interesting in the slightest. And that's almost the last action sequence. I mean, there is a fight after it, but it's pretty much the last action sequence, and it's two fast cars driving through a field with nothing else happening. So, yeah, uh, make of that what you will. The director's quite adept at the action. I mean, he has a love of making things explode. So there are moments when people get shot in the head where it is quite graphic, but you only see a split second of it, so they managed to make it a little bit light. But I think they should have gone whole hog, and it should have been brutal. It should have been an Arnie film, but they didn't, and that's unfortunate. But I think the main problem I had with The Last Stand is the fact that it just felt safe as a return to his gun wielding action stance. It feels too safe as a return. It should have been this momentous occasion, but it really wasn't. And I think The Last Stand, if it had come out in a few years after his return, people would have gone, yeah, that was pretty good. But as a return, it kind of has this sort of expectation that it has to be good, and it really isn't that good. And it's got this cameo by Forrest Whitaker that makes absolutely no sense. because he's a good actor and he's playing essentially the role of generic FBI tough guy number one who doesn't actually do anything that tough and just irritates for pretty much the entire time he's on screen. So I think you just feel bad for him, and The Last Stand just does not live up to the hype that it was getting because it was Arnie's return to Hollywood. So if I was going to give it a score, it'd probably be a 4 out of 10 because it just didn't interest me in the way I was expected to. I mean, it came out on DVD and I was so thrilled. I was thinking this is going to be fun, and it just wasn't. So 4 out of 10.